Welcome to the folks who are on the call right now. We still got a couple minutes before 6 p.m., but welcome to this online community conversation about what do we need in our communities. We'll definitely get started no later than 6:05, but we want to give folks time to join. This is Jamaica, and I'll be repeating this message both in the chat and coming off mute to let folks know we'll get started soon. Good evening, folks. Jamaica here. We're going to give it a few minutes for folks to join. Glad to see some familiar names and faces, especially some folks I've not seen in a while. Oh, look, my camera's not on. How are we doing? If I could, come on, there we go. Hey, everybody. Good evening. Maria I just saw a little while ago. So we're going to give it a few minutes for folks to join. Make sure they could find the link that was shared, right? But we'll definitely get started at 6:05. It's a conversation about, what do our communities need that comes from the space of what do we have as well as what do we need, right? Because it's two sides that we're always looking at: the access and opportunity to the things that already exist in our community, as well as what is there either not enough of or what is completely absent. So that's the conversation for this evening. But again, I'm going to give it a few more minutes for folks to join, and then we will get started. So I just resent the email to everyone that was registered. Thought that might be helpful in case someone's not able to find the link. We did have 15 folks registered to be here. Glad to see we have at least half of us here, which in organizer math, for those of us that know, that's normal. But also want to give that opportunity in case folks are missing a link and still getting to join us. Like I said, today's conversation is about what are our community needs, coming from the space of what is it that we already have, what exists in our community that folks simply may need to know about, and then what are the things we either need more of or simply don't have at all. We'll go through a list of some of the things that we have in the city of Schenectady that also reaches further out into the county of Schenectady. And then also dig in on what is missing, what could we have more of, and what does access and opportunity to these programs and services look like, or what should it look like, right? Because unfortunately, there are programs and services that exist, but if folks don't know they exist, that doesn't mean we actually have programs and services. So I'm going to start the PowerPoint presentation again. Let me know if you can see it, because the last time I did this, at first it didn't work. So far, does everyone see it? Thumbs up or nodding or any of those things works. Now let's see if it still works when I do this. No, but I already figured out how to fix it because this happened last time. Can you see it now? Yay! Awesome. So welcome folks to the What Do Our Communities Need community conversation, for us to come together and do all the things that I've said several times now, so I'm not going to repeat myself. What I will do is give a brief introduction about who all of us is. Even though many folks on this call are familiar in a variety of ways about who all of us is as an organization, I think it's really important to just really ground ourselves in where we're coming from in the work that we do. Our full name is actually All of Us Community Action Group, because we are about all of us, we are about community, and we are about action. And we are a Black-led grassroots organization that works to unite people across our differences. All of them are listed here. Mind you, there are many more that could be listed. The work that we do is about uniting us across these socially created differences to end systems of exploitation and oppression for all groups, and doing that in a very strong partnership model with other groups and organizations. If we narrow it down, right, put a fine point on it, the mission of all of us is to support and strengthen marginalized communities in the fight for Black liberation and an end to all forms of racism, oppression, and exploitation, uniting people across socially created divisions. What that looks like is imagining, creating, and utilizing systems of equity and justice, not punishment, policing, and the carceral state, right? How do we invest in communities? That's what we ground the work in every single day, regardless of where we are and how we show up. This is what it means for us to be in community and work collectively together. But today, what is it that we have, right? If we're talking about investing in our communities, if we're talking about the needs of individuals, what are the programs and services available to residents in the city of Schenectady specifically? And while we're talking about Schenectady, many of these things are seen in other localities across the greater capital region, whether it's Albany or Troy, or even some of our more rural or suburban areas may have programs and services that reflect some of the ones that we are going to see on this next slide. This is what it looks like, right? Again, this is just some of the programs and services that exist in the city of Schenectady. Feel free to drop in the chat, right? If you don't see a particular logo up on this screen, the first one that pops to mind for me is the Human Rights Commission of Schenectady County. But are there other programs and services that you know of in the city of Schenectady that are not listed? besides the libraries that we have, right? We see Phyllis Bort and the Mount Pleasant branch. We know there's the main branch downtown as well, the Boys and Girls Club and Girls Inc. There's also, of course, Sikkim, which, while it is specifically a food pantry, they do so much more than just food pantry services. They are out in our community. This particular logo shows the summer meals program that they offer over the summer all the way through September 1st. There are other services that are offered through Sikkim. There's a closet, Miss Pearl's Closet, where they have clothing and supplies that people can go through, right? So these are some of them. Planned Parenthood, definitely in our community with services. The YWCA, on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, there's Will Revis with Cocoa House. Again, what is the programs and services for some of our youth for after-school programs? SCAP, our schools, Legal Aid Society. I don't know if many people even know about the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York. They do cover Schenectady County and offer free legal services for individuals for a variety of reasons, including as it relates to housing and eviction. And how could we forget the Schenectady Foundation that works directly to support many of the programs and services that are in the city of Schenectady, as well as looking for opportunities to financially support programs that don't exist, right? What are the ideas for different neighborhoods or for the city as a whole that need help getting started? I'm looking at the chat now. Things of my very own. Yup, Electric City Barn. We are blessed to be service rich, but the system can be difficult to navigate. We need to make it easier for residents to connect with what they are seeking. And I see people are loving that comment. Absolutely. And again, this is not a full list. This screen shows a small snapshot of some of the programs and services, and I absolutely agree. There are other needs when it comes to direct service, that access point in the system being part of it. Schenectady Community Action Program, which was listed on that slide, also has an info op community resource directory. I'm going to see if we can actually take a quick look at that directory. Yes, thank you. The Street Soldiers, that's another group of individuals that are helping in our community. Let's see if all goes well with technology that we're able to open this and see it. All right, I'm pretty sure we can see it now. So this directory, which was created by Schenectady Community Action Program, is actually from, ready for it, July of 2015. So while this is a very helpful resource, we do need to also acknowledge it probably needs to be updated, right? There can be programs and services in here that maybe no longer exist, or there can be programs and services that we don't have listed that should be. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Adine. The Seat Center, definitely something that we should mention as a program and service here in the city of Schenectady. This document, which anyone who registered will receive the link to this document. Also, we'll be sharing it on our social media pages for individuals and sending it out by email for folks to be able to look through. This guide contains 72 organizations with a wide range of services for each agency. And it also is divided by categories, right? So what is the help for individuals who are currently or previously using animal support services, baby supplies, behavioral health? You can see here the different list. I'm not going to go through all of them. Childcare, right? What's the opportunity for getting support for childcare services, as well as crisis intervention and dental health? Things of my very own is listed on here for clothing, as well as the Boys and Girls Club for children birth through 12. There's also the domestic violence and education, health, energy assistance. So this quick snapshot, right, that was created back in 2015 gives some of the programs and services that at least at once were an opportunity for individuals to find help and assistance for different programs and needs that they may have. Again, because it is from 2015, we're not 100% sure that all of these programs and services still exist, or that the contact information is still the same, right? The Boys and Girls Club of Schenectady in 2015 was at a different location than it is now. So while this is helpful to get people started, it still isn't everything that is needed. And that's the kind of things we want to talk about and look at. If we have something, is it up to date? What information needs to be added? Are any of these programs and services completely accessible to the individuals that are currently living in our community? And when I say currently living in our community, that means anyone who is here today or that's going to show up tomorrow. This would be our full community, is everyone. It truly is all of us, right? So for us to be able to move forward with what it looks like for the programs and services that are needed, we then have to ask ourselves, what do we need? So there was a small snapshot of programs and services. So here's the question to us, to those of us that are on this call right now. And I'm going to ask, you can either come off of mute and share personally with your voice, or if you prefer to write it in the chat. What are the program and services that residents need today? What is needed for everyone to feel and be, I'll say feel and be, happy, healthy, and safe? Do we need more of a certain program, or is there something needed that we do not already have? So please, take the time and just think for a second. What more do we need specifically for the city of Schenectady? But that may just be a service in general that any individual, regardless of where they are, would be something that they need. Take a couple seconds, feel free to either drop it in the chat or come off of mute and share with everyone. And welcome to anyone that's joined us. Glad that you could make it. Jump right in.
Well, nobody likes to be first, but I'll be happy to go first if that's okay. My name's Adine Viscusi. I am a food manufacturer in Schenectady. I'm representing the Electric City Food Co-op. We're trying to bring a full service grocery store to downtown Schenectady, but also I'm super committed and have been very passionate about working within the confines of the newly formed Food Council in Schenectady to try and access the neighborhoods a little bit better with more nutritious food. So yes, I want a shiny downtown store, but I am also super focused on accessing the neighborhoods and getting into the communities. So that's what brings me here, and hopefully we'll make some connections and be able to see this become a reality.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to read what's in the chat, and then if there's other folks that want to pop in and share on mic, absolutely. So I see someone's been thinking a lot about assistance with gaining state employment. It is difficult to figure out how to apply for a state job. I'm going to +1 that and say, sometimes it's difficult to find any job, right? What does that look like? Access to mental health supports, therapy, psychiatric groups, etc., especially especially since COVID. Yes, thank you for that, right? We do know that there was a need for programs and services before. No one's, I think, at this point able to dispute that. And COVID simply exacerbated a situation that already existed and created a problem for folks that didn't think they had a problem before, right? Realize that they were one paycheck away from being homeless, that they didn't have the full access to health care that they thought they did, that they were struggling with food and job insecurities that prior to COVID didn't exist for them. Thank you for lifting all of those things up. Are there other folks that have thoughts about the programs and services that are needed, whether it's because there's not enough of them or something that doesn't exist at all? It's okay. It's okay if, folks prefer not to come off mic. So again, appreciate individuals using the chat. Continued Narcan training and information about opioids in Schenectady. Yes, and yes, I'm going to expand on that a little bit from my perspective. I think that additional information and resources about how we talk about or interact with people who are currently or formerly using, right? That is also a hardship that I've seen in the community. There are individuals who need housing, and I saw someone put in the chat, affordable housing. We have quite a crisis on our hands, indeed. And right now, there are some places that if you are found to be actively using, you're not allowed to stay in that housing. So it means that housing no longer is a human right for every individual, that some people are not able to be in housing based on their medical condition, right? So we have a housing shortage. We've had one for a long time. It just continues to get worse. And we have individuals who are in need of health care at a variety of levels, including if they are currently or formerly using any type of narcotic, that they may not have access to housing, and they may not have information that they need for where they currently are in their journey. So yes, absolutely. Thank you again. Is there anyone else that wants to share with us some of the needs that we have in our community? I don't want to be the person to call on Maria, but I will if she's willing to share what she sees, or if anyone else wants to add, including Jen, if you'd like to add your thoughts, or Johan, if you'd like to add where you see the needs that we have in our community, either in the chat or coming off mute to share. While you're thinking about it, someone else did add in the chat. Local enterprise development support for businesses and nonprofit co-op. Absolutely. An additional comment. I've been feeling that it would be nice if there are more spaces for community and connection. I think people have been feeling disconnected since the start of lockdown, and many people have struggled to re-enter community spaces. Oh my goodness, thank you so much. One of the conversations that we've been having is about building community infrastructure. What would it mean? What does it look like for us to actually talk to our neighbors, to know our neighbors' names, to speak to each other when there is a concern, a conflict, or an issue? If this is the example I often give, if Johnny was outside playing with Rodney and they're playing basketball or baseball and somebody's ball goes through a window, wouldn't it be nice if we felt comfortable enough to go talk to their parent instead of calling 911, right? Can we actually speak to each other and have a conversation and work with restorative practices where we're repairing and rebuilding relationships? But we'd have to have relationships first. So all of the community and connection, what do community centers look like? for the city of Schenectady? How many folks can name more than one community center that's in the boundaries of the city of Schenectady? I'm going to say no one. More than one?
I
The
don't know.
only one, right. Go ahead, Maria.
I said I don't know any.
Hamilton Hill Art Center still exists. And they are located, the building, their building structure is on Hampton Hill by Jerry Burrell Park. They also utilize Emmanuel Frieden's Church for space for programming. We don't have a community center. We do have very much the Miracle on Craig Street, which is working diligently to get the Carver Community Center back open again, which was such a jewel and godsend for the Hamilton Hill community and the larger Schenectady community. So I, hope very much all of the people that have been involved with that project for years continue to push forward. But it is, we don't have community space and community centers beyond our parks. And I do want to lift up really quick, and Ryan, I see your hand, so I'm definitely coming to you. Our Parks Department this summer actually has re-engaged, adding programs back to our park for the summer. And it has been beautiful to watch. But someone pointed out in the chat earlier, if folks don't know about it, then we're missing that opportunity. Ren, go ahead. Oh, I don't hear Ren. Does anyone else hear Ren? Sure. Oh, listen, I had technological issues earlier, which was really great when no one can see the PowerPoint presentation. So definitely, if you need to switch your microphone to pick up or use the chat, please do. While Ren's figuring out technological issues, any other thoughts about programs and services that we need? I mean, we've listed quite a few, and I think it's a really great list. If those are the programs and services that we need, and as we think of them, please, feel free to jump back in, add it to the chat, or come off of mute. But let's also be really mindful about who makes decisions about the resources that people need, right? We live in a city, and while we have individual organizations that provide services, and they receive funding from however they receive funding, and there's a multitude of ways, and we don't need to get completely into all of the details, but there are local, state, and federal pots of money that go into different programs and services. And at every single level, every single day, individuals decide how money is allocated to different programs and services. One of the things that we're hoping for is that more people are coming together to talk about what programs and services are needed, and then we're able to get that information to the individuals that are making those decisions every single day. What that civic engagement looks like, what the community engagement looks like, so that when someone decides we need a community center, it's because the people said we needed a community center. Did I hear Ren come off of? Maybe not. Okay. Hopefully Ren is still on the call. So if we know we have some programs and services that help us, we know that there's more that we need, how can we be part of communities getting what they need? Because every community member has the ability to be involved and engaged at a multitude of levels. Was just on a great call with Maria and some other folks that were talking about some of those needs. And there is this brilliant man who says wonderful things, including, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced, right? So us identifying the programs and services that are needed is a step in us making sure that programs and services actually get to the people who need them. What's up? What's Jen got? Now you're going to have to text what it says because
I
I
have that exact quote written in my own handwriting on the front of this notebook.
Yes, right? Absolutely. So this is part of the process that we need to first identify and face the issues that we have. And right now we're talking about the issue of the needs of individuals in the community. I am not going to go through this entire slide that you are looking at right now, right? But if we're talking about the needs of a community and what does change look like, we should also be aware there are multiple ways for folks to be involved. There are multiple things that can be done to ensure that people get what they need in our communities. And often we talk about direct service, and we should. We absolutely should talk about direct service because people have needs right now. I am going to quickly segue. The call I was on earlier was about the people seeking asylum who are living at the Super 8 in Rotterdam. What are their direct needs that they have right now? Clothing, and I mean also including shoes for men, women, and children, that they have some needs related to medical supplies that are over the counter. So there are children, there are families living there. They have direct service immediate needs that should be met. And there are people across the county that are coming together. Shout out to Maria and Wendy for pulling together the Allies for Justice to ensure that people who want to help are collectively working together to help. And I'm proud to be a part of that work. But there's also community development, there's advocacy, and there's organizing, because there's the short-term immediate needs. And then again, someone in the chat talked about the systems and structures. That's long-term goals. And that means change at a different level. And for folks to be able to have long-term change, then we're talking about advocacy and organizing. No surprise that that would come up in this conversation. Thank you to the person who dropped in the chat, who's working with an organization to help refugees. Also, if you're in Schenectady County and looking specifically to help Schenectady County, you can find Allies for Justice Schenectady County online. We will again share that information by email. So if you don't find it, it's fine. You'll get a direct link to be able to directly support the work that's happening on the ground right now. Because the work that's happening with the individuals at the Super 8 motel is not any different than the folks who have already been living here. It is not an us versus them. It's that the system and structures in place are not helping those people who are in need. That includes residents who already were living here last week and the residents who may end up being here next week. One of the ways that isn't necessarily listed on that slide about how we can be involved and how we can be engaged and what does it look like to create change and make sure that access and opportunity gets to individuals is voter registration and education. Over the last 3 years, we've had countless conversations with folks in the community. And as this slide shows, and as we very much found out, we have low voter engagement, low voter turnout across the marginalized communities in Schenectady. And it shouldn't be that way. Everyone should have access and opportunity to be civically engaged, to understand the role of government, to have access and opportunity to know who our mayor is. There are people who live in this city who have lived here for quite some time that don't know who the mayor is, how many people are on the city council, when they meet, what the decisions are that they make, even though these individuals make decisions that impact their lives every single day. We have been focusing on speaking with people in Hamilton Hill, Mont Pleasant, and Vale. While we understand that our city has needs across the city and every single zip code, these are the 3 communities that we've looked at. And I do want to share with you some statistics when we're thinking about what are the needs of our communities and what does that look like. Here are some numbers that can help us understand the engagement level in the city of Schenectady. In the 2022 election, Hamilton Hill had an election turnout rate of 21%, Vale had a 25% turnout rate, and Mont Pleasant had a 22% rate. Of those communities, over 70% of Vale, Hamilton Hill, and Mont Pleasant residents are people of color. 48% of Vale and Hamilton Hill residents are Black. And what this means is that marginalized and disenfranchised community members' voices are not being heard. This directly impacts the programs and services of what is needed and what is being provided to communities. And if individuals are not engaged at this level of our city, then we can also hypothesize there are other ways that they're not engaged and involved, such as the programs and services that already exist, or letting folks know which programs and services are needed. And I see in the chat, voting is one of the most important ways of making our voices heard. Lila Watson, who is one of Sean Young's favorite activist quotes, I think really is on point when it comes to thinking about community at every single level and every part of engagement, including what are the community's needs, what are the programs and services. If you've come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's work together. It is not about one of us. It is absolutely about all of us. And so as we continue to have these conversations, as we build these lists of people who are talking to each other and working together, as we create new coalitions and alliances to address the needs in our community, we do always have to center the people we are trying to help and their needs and their priorities and what it is that they're asking for and need access to. I do appreciate this comment that I just see in the chat now. Communities with more barriers to voting and lower rates of voter participation have worse public health outcomes and health disparities. And I see that there's a link to some information. Thank you so much for that. I want to just open the floor up now, right? I shared quite a bit of information. Folks who were not able to see the PowerPoint, if you joined late, do not worry, because the PowerPoint will be shared as a PDF. So if you're looking for the information that was on there, we'll be sure to share it with you, while at the same time, us prioritizing the voices that are in this room. What are we thinking? What are we feeling in the information that was shared, and the things that we've learned from each other?
I think that we should definitely work on that on voting registration, or talking to people about the importance of voting. I know that I tried to take my daughter to vote with me since she was little, you know, and now that she's older and living away, it's very hard to like do that, you know, and so I guess we need to do that. We need to, what are ways that we can do it? I know you have people on the ground doing that, perhaps more volunteers, right, during the summer months to call, and then the day of the voting, right? Because people always find something else that is going on in their lives. Maybe not on purpose, but something else gets on the way. So.
Absolutely. Excuse me. We do have folks that are on the ground. Not gonna put Jen on the spot, the other Jen, but there are folks that are on the ground that we're doing this work, and we're talking to folks and letting them know when the voting registration deadline is, what the different parties are, and sharing a blurb that comes from the party website, right? It's not for our interpretation, it's to share educational information so that folks can make informed decisions. And then also the early voting, right? Voter registration, absentee voting, there's a lot of different pieces. And unfortunately, some folks make an assumption that everyone knows this. They don't. So we're out there, but we absolutely, if there are folks interested in helping with the voter registration education campaign, yes. And there's lots of ways to do that. We're going to have additional community conversations, as well as our on the ground, in the face community events where we're always having food. We try to center them in different locations, either at the Mont Pleasant Library, Electric City Barn, the Sikkim Food Pantry parking lot. If you have a different location as a suggestion, like, totally let us know. But we are out there, and this is going all the way through November. We're not going to stop. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I was, Jamaica, first, thank you for this, and thank you for all the hard work you're doing. This is not easy, and you know that, and I think we know that, so we appreciate you. I think trying to understand why people aren't coming out to vote is important, and there are probably a number of reasons, and maybe, you know, one of my instincts is just that they don't feel it matters. Perhaps they don't feel that their voice is being heard. And so how does that change? And I go back to an earlier conversation about creating more community spaces where people can come together and be engaged in the discussions that then can turn into action. I think people will be involved, but they want to see something happen. You know, and for example, I mean, I don't want to pick on anyone in particular processes, but we can see like what's going on with, say, the ARPA grant process with the city, and now they're pulling back money that's there for the community, and all of that money could be used for something like creating community spaces. But you know what it turned into was sort of a competition for funds, and that can be changed by our legislators. So that's, you know, one of the things that that people need to start understanding is that they can influence their legislators. And I believe in there's probably just paraphrasing the concept of where people lead, the leaders will follow. And but it's getting them gathered. That's the difficult part. And I think we have to find ways to make that easier for people to come together and be engaged and feel as though they've actually made a contribution. And I don't have the answer to all that, but it seems like that's one of the things we need to focus on.
I agree. One of the things that has very much been a blessing in doing this work that I do is the opportunity to speak to people one-on-one, but also in group settings. Bob, you remember we had that housing conversation at Sikkim, right? Folks from different vantage points and sitting in different spaces came together to have a conversation. And then we had our community conversations after the Black Freedom Project survey, where people shared their information, and then we came back together. Folks want to talk about the things that are impacting their lives, and they have solutions, right? They're not there just to complain. I stopped myself from cussing. They're not there just to complain. They do have solutions about what it looks like for their lives. And if all of us, not the organization, come together and have a shared vision and goal, the leaders have no choice, right? Because the way democracy works in this country is that if everyone is engaged, if everyone shows up to the polls, then everyone's voice is heard. We're not there yet. we've never been a full democracy where everyone had access and opportunity to participate in our voting system. And therefore, we don't yet hear everyone's voice to make decisions. And so if we are able to get community members to come together and say, hey, listen, this is where we stand, and we are all registered to vote, and we're coming to the polls. I see that someone talked about ballot initiatives. That's also another question, right? What are ballot initiatives? What are they for? What are they asking us? Am I voting yes or no about? It's a good flag, because while we can say voting for a person, here's how you make your decision and here's how you register to vote, how can we also get information to folks about other opinions they should have about decisions that impact their lives? Going back to the chat, I think people feel tired and that there is no change, which speaks to real needs not being met. It is hard to excite voters. People need to feel connected and heard. The numbers told the story, right? Of the people who are actually registered, not a lot of people are coming out. And that's only the people who are registered. There are also, I would guess, without looking directly at the numbers, thousands of people who are eligible to be registered to vote who are not yet registered. So we have people who are registered, but they're not voting. And then we have people who are eligible to register who are not registered. And being able to address both of those things to let them know your voice will matter. That when one person says, my voice doesn't count, that when 300 other people are all saying the same thing, that together your voice has that impact. So if every person who says my voice doesn't count lets their voice be heard, it creates change. And it is a difficult thing to earn the trust of a community, for them to believe in their own agency and power that they hold, when so much of their life has told them the opposite. Are there other thoughts, ideas, questions, feedback? Yes, Jen Bennett.
Jamaica, someone's messaging me in the chat, and it's kind of been an interest. I don't know why they chose me, but they're asking about who can vote, U.S. citizens only. And as far as I know, that's true. I was actually really surprised when I was teaching. At one point I was teaching adults, and it was election night at our school. And I said, oh, let's all go after class and you can vote. And it turned out that only US citizens could vote, even in school elections. So I was surprised to learn that. I just assumed everyone in the community that paid taxes could vote. But that is not the case. So only US citizens can vote, even in school elections, but that doesn't mean your voice can't be heard necessarily. I think that people can still come and speak at city council meetings, could definitely still make their voices heard other ways and get their needs met. But I totally agree that we need to look at who's even eligible to vote.
So that actually is a great, that's something great to talk about, because in Washington, D.C., they locally passed a law that all residents are eligible to vote in local elections, right? So it is not that it doesn't exist anywhere within the United States of America, but localities can pass local laws to offer any resident, right? And there's stipulations, you have to live here for 60 days or whatever it is. I don't know the exact amount of time, but a resident is able to vote in local elections because they're living there, they're paying taxes there. And even if they are not a US citizen by any means, right? Because there's more than one way to be a US citizen, they still are living in those communities. So Washington, D.C. actually did pass it. It has been challenged. I don't know where it stands right now, but it was something that happened. And there are other individuals that are having that conversation. The Working Families Party has been in support of changing local election laws to be more inclusive of all residents, because your Your status as a citizen or a documented immigrant does not capture fully your commitment to a community or how the decisions of people who are making decisions about allocation of resources impact you, right? In our schools, to your point, Jen, our schools educate every child. New York state law is that every child will receive a quality education, regardless of their immigration status. So those children are in our schools, they are being educated, and there are elections for school boards. Um, I don't want to mispronounce your name. Is it Shabina?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you want to add more?
No, by Jen said it. I'm not ready. Was coming. I was just saying, if you're gonna say vote, then use the word citizen, or because you don't want to run away with the wrong ID.
It's true. And when it's a good flag for us to make sure as we're talking to community members, because we make no assumptions. We talk to every single person we see. We don't assume whether or not they have a permanent address or if they are a US citizen by any means. We simply speak to every person in the community because we believe every person deserves to have that information and knowledge. There was a 6-year-old that had a question about juice.
Well, his voice needs to be heard.
Yes, and he does a very good job of raising his voice. Anyone that's been in a room where there's a Roman. Other thoughts, ideas about community needs and what we've heard?
This is my first time, so I'm just listening in. So by the you were talking a lot about voting. That's why I mentioned that. So for now, I'm just gonna listen. Thank
Elizabeth,
you.
absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Elizabeth, I see your hand.
Thanks. I am curious, in the Democratic primary, City Council President Marion Porterfield had really emphasized the importance of participation and long-term planning for the community. And it seems to resonate a lot with this conversation of getting a clear agenda of what people think neighborhood by neighborhood is important, both for the part and the whole. It was a very close election. I don't know how many people voted for her because that was something that was really important. But if it is, then it looks like there's really strong support for that. And I'm curious how I would love to see that. I would love to see strong neighborhood planning and a comprehensive plan that looks at issues like gentrification and climate resilience and the stuff that we collectively need to really be thinking about. I'm curious what folks think, if that's important, if there's an opportunity to sort of ride some of that momentum, knowing that there are champions of that potentially on council, even if the mayor was opposed to it.
I think it's that community education and engagement we're talking about, right? We want information from individuals about what their needs are. We also want to share information with them about what is currently happening and how we can influence the things that are happening. That was less than 300 votes during the primary, right? So if we're talking again, if we go back to the numbers, that about 20% of individuals in the most marginalized communities showed up to vote. That's of the people registered, not including people who are not registered. We don't know what every person's vote was or would have been because they didn't all show up to the polls. We know that those who did vote made that decision for everyone else. And these are the types of conversations to have. I also appreciate that in the chat, right? We need to stand together to educate lawmakers, legislators, and decision makers what the community needs and wants. They don't understand. Some maybe do. I don't know if they all do. The way the city is addressing food in the neighborhoods equates to a Save-A-Lot in the old Mohawk Honda site. This is not the best solution for our communities. So there is a lot of work to be done. There's also a lot that we each can do every single day. Joining calls like this to discuss what the needs are. All of us collects this information and we don't just hold it in some silo. We look for every opportunity to share it back out with other groups and organizations. We look for opportunities to share it with the community itself and collect additional feedback, right? Like, hey, we had this conversation. Does it sound right? Does it resonate with you? Do you agree with where this conversation went? And then to say, whether your answer is yes or no, here's how your voice can be heard. Showing up at city council meetings, showing up at school board meetings. I am an elected official. I am a school board member, elected in the same process, mind you, right? And for school board elections, there's a much lower turnout. So if less than 3,000 people showed up to vote in the primary election for our local elections, it is less people that show up that vote for the school board who's spending millions of dollars on our children, right? Deciding the contracts for our teachers, which programs and services should be prioritized, what are the policies, right? The school board specifically looks at what are the policies that we are writing that sets the agenda for the superintendent to carry out across our school district. What are our priorities? And folks don't think that's important to show up for. So I appreciate that I was elected and that I get the opportunity to serve. I also am concerned myself about voter turnout. I want more people to show up, whether I'm reelected or not. I want more people to show up and to be engaged in the process. Our school elections matter. We had a number of ballot initiatives at the last school board election that talked about purchasing buildings, about how much money we should put away for rainy day funds, and lots of detail oriented that the school district actually took the time to explain during community meetings that very few people showed up at. This engagement problem is a problem. And it's at our school district level, the city, the county, right? The city of Schenectady is part of the county of Schenectady inside New York State in the United States of America. Other thoughts and ideas. We will be wrapping up in about 5 minutes, but final thoughts as we're considering what it looks like to address the needs of people in our community.
Since you're sitting on the school board and you're talking about teachers getting more raise of pay, you should start looking at how they're teaching. Kids could not submit to work and they automatically getting 50% for it. And I could give you proof for that. Teachers are whole paid. It become a disturbance in classroom because it's an excuse for them. So we're looking for them to get more pay. We know it's a traumatized school we're working with. Maybe you guys should start looking into that, because at the end of the day, vote or not, this may be a reason why people is not turning out, because we're not looking at the man at the top so much at time. Yeah, we're gonna blame you guys, but when we go to schools and we voice your opinion and it doesn't matter, why would we come vote for you guys? If you don't educate them, we're talking about educate. Every time you're talking about teachers getting raised up, what happened to the paraprofessional teacher when they are getting $5 an hour for go substituting your job, and they could go and get a classroom quiet and hold up, you've been trained for this, so how you can't get it?
Your voice
Then adults are getting discussion with children. That the adults that works in this building is bringing it back into the community. So how are you going to the school and find something?
You are proving the point, right?
So,
All of this information that you have,
and what I'm telling you here is not nothing the school don't know.
and so the conversation then, right? So the conversation that I have with parents in the community, because I get phone calls and emails on a regular basis from individuals that have complaints. I'm able to educate them about what the process is. If this, then what, right?
And,
Because so just listen for 1 second, right? There, it's about information. And it also is about accountability. It's about being heard. It's about change. And for those things to happen, the needs of our children, then as we're having this conversation, how can parents come together? Because you're right, if one parent complains, nobody cares, or they don't care enough to change it. They should. And sometimes there is a teacher or an administrator that actually shows up and says, you know what, I got one complaint and that complaint is enough for me. It doesn't always happen. So how is it that we work collectively for more parents to come together, that we're educated about the process? Because if we don't know what the process is, we can't change it. And I definitely want to talk to you offline, right? Because I mean, I see that someone else has their hand up. And yes, there are changes that absolutely need to be made. And we're coming together today to talk about the needs. I am happy to have a conversation with you about what that looks like and how I can help you with whatever it is that you see that needs to change.
now, before we come off, I also want to say when there's people at the administration level and who is sitting in the chair is trying to help us in the committee, those are the people is getting pushed out of the school district. And those, so before we leave, I'm going to tell those are we have people who help, but those are the people who's getting pushed out. Thank you.
Absolutely. The thing is, unfortunately, us talking about it here doesn't change it. There is a place to talk about it. There is a way to create change so those things don't continue to happen. And that's what we need to do. We are talking to like-minded folks right now, right? I don't think anyone on this call is going to say, oh my gosh, I don't believe you or I don't agree. But how we create that change.
Yeah, but we're not looking for people to believe me. How about doing an investigation? If I'm a parent and I'm giving you every evidence, what am I doing with it?
And that's why I'm saying to you, I can share with you what that process is when we are not being heard, because there is a process. It's not fair. We should be able to say something's wrong and that's enough. It's not fair. Unfortunately, that's where we are, which is why we need to create change. And I do want to talk to you offline, Shabina. I did see Jill's hand. So if Jill, you'll be the last person before we wrap up for tonight. If anyone has additional thoughts, comments, or questions, or wants to talk to me one-on-one, untitledandfree@gmail.com. I'm completely accessible. Go ahead, Jill.
Hi, I just want to say hi. I'm community outreach. I volunteer for community outreach with Planned Parenthood of Schenectady, and Ren Cardente is here for health services for Planned Parenthood of Greater New York. So if anybody wants to reach out, Ren will be sharing their email address. If you need help navigating Planned Parenthood of Greater New York or anything like that, please reach out. I thank you for your time.
Absolutely. I also know that Arthur Butler is on here from Schenectady County Community Human Rights. And listen, y'all, we know there are problems all over the place. There are complaints about housing, right? There's discrimination that happens. We have a human rights division. Arthur's going to make sure that I have his correct contact info for anyone that needs to reach out to talk about what a complaint process is as it relates to discrimination. Did I miss anything, Arthur?
No, thank you. And it's on our website, on the county website under human rights. These are crucial conversations and decisions that we come to matter. I think that I applaud everybody for gravitating towards having a plan, a preparedness plan, so that we also take the stuff that we're doing. This is part of the process, so that we're not just reactionary, that we actually have strategies around what our strengths and our weaknesses are and where we can utilize the opportunities that present themselves. And so, we're committed, we're committed to working with all of you, and I'm committed on the county.
Uh-oh, your mute button went back on.
Together in with the city and join forces together. But it is a process. I think sometimes folks don't want to hear that. I never wanted to hear that. But we utilize the people who are at the table to work within the purview of their knowledge of the process and to articulate the voices and the frustration of the people. That has been the success of my strategy, is really how to articulate the frustrations of the people like you, Ms. Shabina, when at the table. So, I applaud you all. I'll be on the next call. And thank you, Jamaica, again, as Rob said, for the hard work that you do. It's very valuable.
It's not one of us, it's all of us, right? So thank you so much for joining tonight and being part of this conversation. We actually got through a lot. As I said, we're going to share the PowerPoint presentation by PDF to anyone that sent us an email. There will be the contact information for the groups and organizations that participated today. And if there is a need for a one-on-one conversation, I'm already reaching out to Sabina to talk about what we need to do to create change specific to an individual. untitledandfree@gmail.com, because the groups and organizations that are doing work are capable of working together and being in more of an alliance and coalition to make sure folks know about the programs and services, as well as identifying the needs that still exist even when we have programs and services in our community, so that everyone has access and opportunity, that no one is struggling to survive, but everyone has an opportunity to thrive. So I appreciate y'all joining me tonight. Be well, drink water, and we will talk soon. Good night, everybody.
Great job. Bye, everybody.